Good evening and welcome. Tonight I'm going to be reading to you this National Geographic magazine called The World's Most Beautiful Places 100 Unforgettable Destinations, with stunning landscapes, breathtaking vistas, and awe-inspiring getaways like these and this. Here's a map of all the places that are listed. A lot of these places I've done videos about their countries, so if you check the description, I'll link those videos down there, and I'll put some up in some cards as well. So if you want to know more about certain countries, be sure to check those out. And I think like the next 3 or 4 countries that I'm gonna cover will also be in here, so subscribe so you don't miss out on those. But let's just dive right in, starting with peaks and valleys. Number 1 is Saguaro National Park in Arizona. Would you look at the cacti here while I read? The sun sets, shadows lengthen, and mountains grow orange-pink in the gathering dusk at Saguaro National Park. One of the iconic images of the American West then slowly emerges as hundreds of saguaro cacti, the largest cactus in the United States, take on their unmistakable silhouettes against the darkening sky. Look at the rainbow. Number 2 is the redwood forests in California, where I live. Big is beautiful when it comes to coast redwoods, and they don't come much bigger than in Redwood National Park, national and state parks, which protect a precious relic forest. Some 45% of all surviving coast redwood habitat, whose 350-foot-tall, 2,000-year-old trees are among the world's oldest and tallest living organisms. Number 3 is the Chiang Mai province in Thailand. The landscapes of Chiang Mai are as varied as the many peoples that have long been drawn to this area of Thailand, one of Southeast Asia's most important historical crossroads. Paddy fields fill the lowlands, and sinuous hillside terraces with a vivid patchwork of jade and emerald. Encroaching on all sides is the darker, denser green of jungle, laced with the slow-flowing waters and shadowed by mountains such as Doi Inthanon and Doi Changdao, 2 of the country's highest peaks. There you go. Number 4 is Masai Mara National Reserve in southwestern Kenya. When the sun sets in the Masai Mara National Reserve, Africa's vast skies fill with stars as the tree-dotted grasslands and low escarpments of the savanna below are bathed in a gentle golden glow. Shadows gather, and the dry, searing heat of the day gives way to the balmy stillness of twilight, a cooling calm before the storm of evening activity erupts among many of the thousands of creatures. Lions, leopards, elephants, rhinoceroses, hyenas, and more that call this corner of southwestern Kenya home. Number 5 is Tuscany in central Italy. Tuscany is blessed even by Italy's high standards. In Florence, it has Europe's greatest Renaissance city, and in Siena, its most perfect medieval town. Hilltop villages look much as they have for centuries, and the timeless landscapes, worked over millennia, are a tapestry of vineyards, age-old olive groves, cypress-topped hills, rustic farmhouses, and fields of wheat and summer sunflowers. Visitors gorged on art and scenery can feast on the region's sublime food or sample wine at a profusion of wineries. Next is Torres del Paine in Patagonia, Chile. Yes, they are torres, towers. But no human-made tower has the awe-inspiring grandeur of the vast, soaring granite monoliths at the heart of the Torres del Paine Massif. Yet this great easterly spur of the Andes, protected by a 700-square-mile national park, offers far more than skyscraping spires and pinnacles. Trails wend through pine-scented forest, past emerald lakes, and across wind-swept plains to the fringes of the Gray, Dixon, and other glaciers of the southern Patagonian ice field. Number 7 is Olympic National Park on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington. The U.S. National Park Service has called this picturesque expanse 3 parks in one. Only 3. Someone needs to recount, because few areas in North America are quite as varied. Landscape proliferates from the wild beaches at the park's fringes through vast tracts of old-growth rainforest dense with mossy undergrowth and fast-flowing streams, to the alpine meadows and deep-cut valleys that herald the glaciers at the park's jagged mountainous heart. Number 8 is Yosemite National Park in California. Some 600,000 visitors flock to Yosemite National Park in an average July. By January, that figure drops dramatically, making winter a wonderful time to visit, not just for the lack of crowds, but also for the added splendor that snow lends to the landscape and the ice-sharp clarity of the mountains on crisp, blue-skied days. Join rangers on guided snowshoe hikes, sit in a warm shuttle bus on a drive around the park, or just curl up in front of the fire at the Ahwahnee Hotel, a National Historical Landmark. Number 9 is Denali National Park in Alaska. You might come to see bears foraging in the brush, or to admire the sublime mountain scenery along the 90-mile Denali Park Road, or with the hope of spotting moose and herds of caribou at the Teklanika Valley. Whatever you come to see in Denali National Park, a protected area about the size of Massachusetts, you won't want to leave without a glimpse of its majestic masterpiece, the Mountain Denali, formerly Mount McKinley, the highest point in North America. There's some little ones. Number 10 is Jeju Island in South Korea. A spectacular volcano, Hadasan, has bequeathed Jeju many of its pristine natural features and rich habitats. These include a main crater, 360 minor craters, and a profusion of landscapes that range from black sand beaches and waterfall-laced jungle to upland tundra and fertile lowlands that support a wealth of rare flora and fauna. Next is Paro Taksang in Bhutan. Few outsiders visit the Himalayan kingdom of Bhutan, and even fewer climb to Taksang, or the Tiger's Nest, a cliff-edge Buddhist monastery founded in the 17th century and situated at 10,236 feet, nestled in pristine and mist-shrouded mountains that rise above mostly untouched forests. Down here we have Bryce Canyon in Utah. Start with color, reds, browns, ochres, and the limestone of the Ponsongut Plateau. Add the power of natural erosion and the millennial work of frost, wind, and water. Then stand back and admire one of nature's most dazzling creations, the immense rock amphitheaters and rock pinnacles or hoodoos of Bryce Canyon. Next is Lauterbrunnen in Switzerland. Lauterbrunnen is one of the Alps' deepest valleys, guarded by the great peaks of the Eiger, Munch, and Jungfrau. Rent a scooter and skirt past the area's velvety fields and sparkling waterfalls to Jungfrau Railway's Jungfraujoch station, which at 11,332 feet is Europe's highest. Next is Alpine National Park in Victoria, Australia. Sweeping mountain ridges, jagged peaks, wild rivers, snow gum forests, flower-filled meadows, and high plains grasslands. Even in a country as vast and as rich in landscapes as Australia, the wide open spaces of Alpine National Park have a unique natural grandeur. Then we have Glacier National Park in Montana. Scenery in the 1,583 square miles of Glacier National Park is so magnificent that the park has been called the crown of the continent. Ecosystems from prairie to tundra provide habitats for many hundreds of plants and animals, while groomed hiking trails help open the area to almost 3 million visitors a year. Next is Jasper National Park in Alberta, Canada. Winter, spring, summer, or fall, it makes no difference. The majesty of Jasper National Park at the heart of the Canadian Rockies remains undiminished. This varied and pristine landscape, which is also the largest national park in the Rockies, cries out to outdoor enthusiasts who flock here year-round to experience a wilderness of river, forest, mountain, and ice, seduced by its magnificent trails, soaring peaks, pristine powder, and crashing white water. Doesn't this look like a Bob Ross painting? The happy trees and the reflection of the mountains in the water, the mist. And Bob Ross would love this picture, don't you think? Next we have Killarney in County Kerry, Ireland. It's a soft day, the Irish would say to describe a mizzling afternoon with a bit of rain. Soft days come often to Killarney in Ireland's southwest corner, courtesy of the Atlantic and the Gulf Stream, but the result is a verdant landscape of bubbling brooks, waterfalls, and lakes framed by dulcet woods of oak and yew, lush banks of ferns, and fuchsia-tinged hedgerows. Above it all soar the steep slopes of the country's highest mountain range, the magnificently named McGillicuddy's Reeks. 18 is Jotunheimen National Park in Bessigen, Norway. Vast lakes of sparkling water weave through high, wind-scoured mountain ridges in this magnificently empty, ice-carved park. Hikers tackling the region's tough but popular 7-hour Bessigen Trail will experience some of the breathtaking grandeur of a region Norwegians call the Land of the Giants. Next is Munnar in Western Ghats, India. The Western Ghats are among the world's grandest and most diverse mountain ranges, stretching almost 1,000 miles down India's western coast. They are home to at least 325 threatened species. Among the diverse flora is one that has greatly improved a lot of humankind over the millennia, Camellia sinensis, the tea plant, dressing the hills in vibrant greens. Next is Cradle Mountain National Park in Tasmania, Australia. Jagged peaks, ancient rainforest, beech woods, and alpine heathland make up much of Cradle Mountain's pristine wilderness, a haven for remarkable wildlife that is crisscrossed by trails such as the Overland Track, one of Australia's finest bushwalks. Next is autumn in New England in Vermont, a region that is already prettier than a picture. All village greens, russet red barns, and steepled churches become prettier still as the leaves start to turn in the fall. Countless festivals celebrate this transformation, which is one of the greatest free shows on earth. Next is Aoraki, or Mount Cook National Park in New Zealand. Many of New Zealand's loftiest peaks can be found in this awe-inspiring alpine park, including Aoraki, or Mount Cook, the country's highest point. Trails to suit all abilities offer a window onto a spectacular world of ice and snow. Next is the Highlands of Scotland. Sun-dappled moorland, jewel-like lochs, romantic heather-covered mountains, and deep glacier-cut glens or valleys, many steeped in the history of clan warfare and bloody battles, make up the Highlands, the highest, wildest, and most haunting landscape in the British Isles. Next is Annapurna Sanctuary in Nepal. The Annapurna Sanctuary is a magnificent mountain-ringed glacial basin situated above 13,000 feet in the heart of the Himalaya. Sacred to the local Gurung people and unseen by outsiders until the 1950s, it has become a popular trekking destination, largely because it serves as the base camp for climbers tackling the peaks of the surrounding Annapurna range. But no technical skills are required for the multi-day trek up to the camp, nor for the increasingly popular day hikes in and around the sanctuary. And next is the Bali rainforest in Bali in Indonesia. Dawn sees Bali's lush rainforest at its most beautiful. Pale sunlight dapples verdant glades where dew falls and the morning fresh air is alive with bird song. Mist rises above the trees and settles in the deep valleys that radiate from towering volcanoes at the island's heart. Waterfalls crash over moss-covered rocks, and fast-flowing rivers carve through narrow canyons. The Balinese, up with the sun, come to leave offerings at the estimated 20,000 Hindu temples that lie half hidden deep within the forest. So next we're on to rivers and shores. Rivers and shores, starting with the Great Barrier Reef in Queensland, Australia. The seas of Australia's Great Barrier Reef are a rhapsody in blue, a shifting mosaic of sapphire, cobalt, and aquamarine, beneath which lies a still more beautiful world of almost infinite marine variety. Spread across 133,000 square miles, the reef is the world's largest living structure. Next we have Guilin in Guangxi, China, which I really hope I'm saying right. Probably not, but feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Look at the cormorants. Nature's fancy for the fantastical and fairy tale is given full rein in Guilin, in southern China, where wind, water, and time have created one of the world's most spectacular karst landscapes. Carving vast limestone towers, cliffs, and pinnacles from the mountainous and pastoral hills that flank the curves of the Li River. Next is the Napali coast in Kauai, Hawaii. Not for nothing did the coast of northwest Kauai feature in the movie Jurassic Park. I knew this was familiar. The region's vegetation swathed and deeply fissured Napali cliffs, which plunge thousands of feet to pristine and secluded beaches, look like a strange prehistoric world. The cliffs have been formed by a twin assault from the incessant pounding of waves and the swift flowing streams fed by 460 inches of rainfall a year that carve deep clefts and valleys as they crash into the sea from the island's precipitous interior. Next is Crater Lake in Klamath, Oregon. At 1,943 feet, Crater Lake in south-central Oregon is the United States' deepest lake. Because it is fed by precipitation, notably 43 feet of snow a year, and has no inlets or outlets, it is also one of the country's purest, famed for the clarity and startling blue of the water. Formed after the eruption of Mount Mazama, part of the Cascade Range around 7,700 years ago, it is surrounded by jagged cliff-edged rim of the former volcano and dotted with islands created by subsequent eruptions. Next is the Everglades in Florida. The constant creep of slow water weaves a spell in Everglades National Park, beautifully shaping and transforming one of the wildest and most diverse wetland ecosystems in North America. Cypress swamps, sawgrass marsh, mangrove forest, and numerous other habitats across the park's 1.5 million acres provide a rich refuge for wildlife that includes such rare species as the manatee, Florida panther, and American crocodile. And next is Plitvice Lakes in Croatia. Lace-like veils of water, limestone ramparts, and the delicate fall of vegetation frame the 16 Plitvice Lakes, the enchanting centerpiece of Croatia's largest national park. Each is a mesmerizing and ever-changing shade of green, blue, or gray, depending on the play of sunlight and the precise mineral and organic content of the water. Each lake feeds slowly into another over the course of 5 miles, separated by natural, slow-moving banks of calcified moss and algae. Next are the Cliffs of Moher in County Clare, Ireland. Vast sandstone ramparts, battered by wind and wave, mark the point at which Europe falls into the sea. Beyond the Cliffs of Moher on Ireland's west coast, the Atlantic stretches empty to the distant shores of North America. Plants and flowers cling to tiny ledges, and up to 30,000 seabirds, including large colonies of puffins, wheel above the sea from rocky nesting sites. The cliffs reach 702 feet at their highest point, and with more than 1 million visitors a year, one of Ireland's most popular attractions. Next is Zanzibar in Tanzania. The gods have been kind to Zanzibar, the exotic archipelago of numerous tiny islands and 2 large ones, Pemba and Unguja, just off the East African coast. They have blessed it with a climate and soils that favor the growing of cloves, nutmeg, cinnamon, and pepper, which is why the islands are often known as the Spice Islands. On many places around the coast, they have been kinder still, creating long palm-shaded beaches of powdery white sand, coral reefs, and placid, warm turquoise seas. Next is Big Sur in coastal California. No one seems quite to agree on its precise boundaries, but there's no mistaking the wild grandeur of Big Sur, 90 miles or so of precipitous central Californian coastline that combines a sublime maritime beauty, cliffs that plunge straight into the ocean, Pacific sunsets, and wave-lashed headlands, with breathtaking views and habitat-rich hinterland of soaring redwood forest, rich riparian woodland, gentle pasture, mountain wilderness, and chaparral-covered hills. Next is the Amazon River in South America. Where to start with the beauty of the Amazon? With its grandeur, its 4,000-mile length, and the immensity of its rainforest, or with the more intimate beauty found in the variety of its flora and fauna, or perhaps with the infinite secret beauties of its smallest, unknowable reaches that no human eye will ever savor. Next is the Bay of Fires in Tasmania and Australia. The Bay of Fires is a jewel among Tasmania's many pristine landscapes. Even in high season, there are plenty of opportunities to explore its dunes and rocky headlands at sunset, or to camp right on its dazzling white sand beaches, waking to swim in clear blue waters or walk among the foreshore's iconic rust-red, lichen-covered rocks as the sun bathes them in morning light. Next is Loch Katrine in Stirling, Scotland. The romantic landscapes of Loch Katrine, a freshwater lake north of Glasgow, inspired Sir Walter Scott's poem The Lady of the Lake and Gioacchino Rossini's opera La Donna del Lago. Today they beguile visitors who come to hike, cycle, and fish, or to take boat trips aboard the Sir Walter Scott, a historic steamship. Next is Milford Sound in Fiordland, New Zealand. Visitors board boats or hike the Milford Track, New Zealand's most popular multi-day trail, to see Milford Sound, a glacier-cut fjord whose immense rock walls Innumerable waterfalls, lush rainforests, and striking mountain peaks were described by writer Rudyard Kipling as the eighth wonder of the world. Next is the Great Blue Hole in Belize. Blue holes are submarine sinkholes, collapsed cave systems that became submerged at sea levels as sea levels rose after the ice ages. The Great Blue Hole is found on Lighthouse Reef, 43 miles from Belize City, and at around 407 feet deep is among the world's top scuba diving sites. Next is the Okavango Delta in Botswana, the elephants. Botswana's Okavango Delta is one of nature's great anomalies, a vast inland delta created by seasonal floodwaters from the Angolan highlands to the north. From March to June, what would otherwise be an arid, desert-like landscape turns into a verdant oasis that dramatically transforms the lives of the region's wildlife and indigenous peoples. Next is the Seychelles off coastal Africa. Beaches in the Seychelles, 115 islands in the Indian Ocean, almost 1,000 miles from the African coast, are some of the most photographed in the world. And no wonder, given their matchless azure seas, teeming coral reefs, and fine pale pink sands. They are made all the more beautiful by the rounded boulders that characterize much of the archipelago, wave sculpted from granite that formed 700 million years ago, making this some of the most ancient rock on Earth and the Seychelles the oldest islands of any ocean. Next is Newfoundland in Canada. Look at this shore. Newfoundland's coast welcomed the first Europeans, the Vikings, to the New World more than 1,000 years ago. They didn't stay, and no wonder, for though this is a beautiful place, it is also an inhospitable one, girded by cliffs, deep fjords, and wind-buffeted headlands. Icebergs drift offshore from April to June, and abandoned fishing settlements bear witness to the coast's long human history. Visitors come for the solitude, to take in the bracing Atlantic air, and to kayak, hike, or watch for whales and other wildlife. Next is the Lofoten Islands of Norway. The Lofoten Islands lie above the Arctic Circle and form an icy jewel in Norway's spectacular glacial-carved coastal crown. Simple waterfront villages, between which you can hike or cycle on dedicated tracks, sit on the edge of deep fjords, framed by cliffs that teem with millions of seabirds and steep-sided mountains coveted by hikers and skiers. Next is Tahiti in French Polynesia. Who wouldn't want to be shipwrecked on Tahiti, the largest of 118 islands and atolls that make up French Polynesia in the South Pacific? Its warm seas, swaying palms, coastal reefs, and peerless powder-fine beaches are the epitome of the desert island ideal. Is it epitome or epitome? Epitome, I think. Anyway, where was I? Life is relaxed, the people gentle and welcoming in a way that makes it difficult to leave. Next is Kaikoura in Canterbury, New Zealand. Kaikoura takes its name from the indigenous Maori words kai, which means food, and kura, which means crayfish, hinting at the richness of its seas, which attracts a wealth of marine wildlife and is complemented on shore by the coastal allure of cliffs, craggy headlands, and the snow-dusted peaks of the Kaikoura Ranges. Next is the Lake District in England. Poets, writers, and artists have long celebrated the Lake District, England's most romantic landscape, a mountainous region of quaint villages and placid lakes that can be explored on the boats that ply the waters, or by ambling down the many country roads and tracks along the lake shores, or through rustic farms, woodland, and high peaks. Next is Cathedral Cove in the Coromandel Peninsula in New Zealand. The soft rocks at Cathedral Cove on New Zealand's North Island yield gently to the tides, resulting in a complex coast of sea caves, stacks, arches, and white sand beaches. Visitors can explore the coast and its pastoral hinterland on short or multi-day trails, or swim, snorkel, and kayak in the offshore marine reserve. Next is the Okefenokee Swamp in Georgia, America. The Okefenokee Swamp is one of North America's oldest freshwater ecosystems, a pristine 367,000-acre wilderness, accessible via trails, boat tours, boardwalks, and observation towers of marsh, lakes, islands, prairie, open wetlands, and cypress forest. Next is the Iguazu Falls of Parana, Brazil. "Poor Niagara," exclaimed First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt on seeing Iguazu Falls. For this immense series of cataracts on the Brazil-Argentina border is both higher and wider than Niagara Falls, though Niagara boasts a greater flow of water. The falls are formed where the Iguazu River tumbles over a basalt ridge known as the Parana Plateau. A thunderous sound fills the air, and spray from the 275-plus discrete falls veils the enveloping vegetation, rising 269 feet above the turmoil below. Next is Cannon Beach in coastal Oregon. "It was the grandest and most pleasing prospect which my eyes ever surveyed," said the 19th century explorer William Clark, of looking down at Cannon Beach. 200 years later, the view is little changed and can still be enjoyed from the lookout, dubbed Clark's Point of View, accessed from one of the area's many trails. Broad swaths of sandy beach stretch for 9 miles along this tract of Oregon's coastline, backed by a mixture of gentle foreshore, conifer forest, and the peaks of the coastal range. We're halfway through number 50. On to number 51. In the section of cities and beyond, we're at Neuschwanstein Castle in Bavaria, Germany. This fairy tale in stone, the inspiration for the castle in Walt Disney's Sleeping Beauty, was the whim of Ludwig II, the reclusive king of Bavaria, who in 1864 vowed to build a private retreat in the authentic style of the German knights of old. In the end, he spent just 172 days in the castle before his death. So beautiful. Next is Rome in Italy. The ancients called it Caput Mundi, the head of the world. Rome has been a place of awe and grandeur for more than 3,000 years, the city of Caesars, popes, and princes, the city of romance, La Dolce Vita, and languorous days, the city of churches and museums, fountain-splashed piazzas, and majestic monuments to a golden age of empire. Next is Machu Picchu in Peru. By rights, it shouldn't be there. The mist-shrouded heights of the Peruvian Andes are no place to build. Machu Picchu is so remote that it eluded even the Spanish conquistadors, coming to the attention of the outside world only as recently as 1911. Yet build the Inca did, taking an extraordinarily beautiful setting and forging a man-made masterpiece, the purpose of which remains unknown, whose stone ramps and immense terraces seemed to be extensions of the landscape itself. Next is Oxford in England. dreaming spires, chiming bells, royal retreat, seat of learning, and, some would say, the most beautiful town in England. Oxford has many claims to fame, but its chief glories are the buildings of the old city itself, and in particular the collection of colleges and ancient university institutions at its heart. The warm, honey-colored Cotswold stone with which many are built, and the courtyards or quads around which they cluster, results in an architectural harmony unequaled anywhere in Europe. Next is Sintra in Portugal. Sintra is a picturesque wooded hill town, leafy and cool in summer, mild in winter, and privy to beautiful views year-round. What sets it apart from any number of other towns in Portugal is its proximity to Lisbon, the country's capital, just 17 miles to the southeast. This long made it a favored retreat for Portugal's kings, who from about the 13th century began a series of lavish palaces and gardens here that dazzle with their extravagant and often wildly exotic architecture. Number 16 is Savannah in Georgia in the United States. Savannah's townscape has proved wonderfully resistant to change since the founding in 1733, preserving a glorious medley of period buildings, notably white wooden and pillar-fronted houses, as well as stately squares, parks, and elegant streets lined with trees draped with Spanish moss, making it one of the largest national historic landmark districts in America. Next is Bergen in Norway. Wood and color are humble building blocks, but in Bergen, the 1,000-year-old district at the heart of Norway's second largest city, the vivid reds, yellows, oranges, and creams of its wonderful, steeply gabled wooden buildings create one of Europe's loveliest and most unusual historic corridors. The district's wharfs and quayside warehouses were originally built by foreign merchants during the 14th century. Next is Chichen Itza in Yucatan, Mexico. Chichen Itza tantalizes with hints as to the nature of its former inhabitants. The great monuments of this Maya city at its height in the 10th century point to a civilization of obvious power. But what of the site's immense stone-enclosed ball court, built simply to play games, which suggests an altogether more frivolous side to the Maya character? Next is New York City in New York. No one really sees New York for the first time. The Manhattan skyline is one of the most familiar, most photographed modern cityscapes on Earth. Yet visit the city and the dazzling reality of the distant prospect surpasses any imagined expectation. It promises, in the words of F. Scott Fitzgerald in The Great Gatsby, all the mystery and the beauty in the world. Next is Kyoto in Japan. The seat of the emperor and capital of Japan for more than 1,000 years, Kyoto hides its beauty beyond the bounds of the modern city among lakeside shrines, pagodas, peaceful tree-covered hills, gilded temples and pavilions, and the tranquil gardens and tea-houses of imperial villas and palaces. Come in spring, and a profusion of cherry blossoms garland the city with added natural beauty. Next is Rostov-Veliki, I believe, in Russia. In 1667, Yona of Rostov, a powerful metropolitan of the Russian Orthodox Church, vowed to create a residence to rival Moscow's Kremlin 126 miles to the southwest. The result is a gigantic fairy tale in stone, a unique lakeside confection that combines ornate churches, numerous palaces, and a profusion of towers, spires, and silvery domes. Next is St. Petersburg in Russia. When Peter the Great, one of the most powerful rulers in Russian history, built a city, it was never going to be ordinary. Sure enough, St. Petersburg, which he founded in 1703 and which remained Russia's imperial capital until 1918, is a metropolis built on the grandest scale. Noble squares and wide thoroughfares, best enjoyed by taking a stroll along the stately Neva River, provide a vast stage for hundreds of magnificent state buildings, churches, and the vast neoclassical facades of countless palaces. Next is the iconic Great Wall of China. On its own, a wall would not be much to celebrate, but a wall that measures around 12,500 miles in length and marches majestically across mountains, plains, and valleys. China's Great Wall is not one wall from one era, nor is it, strictly speaking, a continuous wall. Its earliest reaches probably date from the 7th century BCE. The majority of the present structure dates from the 14th century Ming dynasty, comprising around 5,500 miles of wall. Next is London, England. History has dealt London many hammer blows. The Great Fire of 1666, the Blitz of 1940, the decline of its docks in the twilight of empire, but none have had any lasting effect on this charming city that manages to reinvent itself while continuing to treasure its past. Heritage and a vibrant present commingle among the city's superlative museums, beautiful parks, cozy pubs, iconic red buses, and stunning sights such as St. Paul's Cathedral and Buckingham Palace. Only the bowler hat has been consigned to history. Next is Santorini in Greece. Some claim it was the source of the legend of Atlantis, while others have said it caused the collapse of the Minoan civilization on Crete. What is sure is that the volcanic eruption at the heart of the Aegean 3,600 years ago, one of the most powerful in history, had the happy effect of creating the collapsed caldera that makes up Santorini. It is an island painted in vivid colors, the white of cliff-top villages, the green of tiny vineyards, and the black of ancient lava, and the encircling sapphire of the sparkling seas. Next is Bagan in Mandalay, Myanmar. The sky lightens pink in the east to reveal a verdant plain, partly covered in stands of palm and tamarind. Rising from the green canopy are temples with otherworldly silhouettes stretching into the dawn haze. In the distance, the faint outlines of the mountains frame the great sweep of the Irrawaddy River. Some 2,230 of a purported original number of 10,000 temples survive, built by the kings of Bagan from 1057 to 1287, when their kingdom was swept away by earthquakes and Kublai Khan and his invading Mongols. 67 is Seville in Andalusia, Spain. An architectural hybrid that gilds the Romanesque and Gothic restraint of southern Europe with the exuberance and intricacies of Islamic art. Nowhere is it more beautifully realized than in Honeystone, Seville, Spanish now, but a Moorish vassal for 5 centuries until 1248. When the Muslims left, their influence remained, infusing the city's buildings for centuries afterward and creating a dazzling city-site monument to the marriage of Islam and Christianity. Next is Istanbul in Turkey. By rights, culture should collide in Istanbul. It is a city that bridges east and west, straddling Europe and Asia, and one that has been subject to pagan, Christian, and Muslim rulers. Yet its cityscape is a study of what happens when different beliefs and backgrounds take hold, whether in the 6th century Hagia Sophia, which throughout time has been home to Christian and Muslim worshippers and previously operated as a museum, or Sultanahmet Camii, the Blue Mosque, infused with the architectural elements of an earlier Byzantine epoch. Next are the pyramids of Giza in Egypt. What could be simpler in form yet quite as beautiful as the pyramids of Giza, the oldest of the 7 wonders of the ancient world? Built some 4,500 years ago as tombs for a triumvirate of pharaohs, the 3 principal pyramids form part of a larger necropolis at the Giza Plateau, 10 miles southwest of Cairo. Next is Amsterdam in the Netherlands. Amsterdam's labyrinthine canals ripple out from the heart of the city, brisk with sightseeing boats by day and shimmering with lights by night. Houseboats, churches, and narrow houses with beautiful, oft-glimpsed period interiors line the waterways, which were built, like many of the city's loveliest buildings, with the riches garnered during the 17th century, golden age of the Dutch Empire. And next is Petra in Amman, Jordan. Petra, from the Greek Petra, or stone, was the capital of the Nabateans between 400 BCE and 106 CE, a rose-red city half as old as time, in the words of the 19th century English cleric John Burgon, colored as if by the blush of dawn, and grown from the rock as if by magic, eternal, silent, beautiful, alone. Next is Washington, in the District of Columbia in the United States. On July 16, 1790, an act was approved to create the capital of the United States on the banks of the Potomac River. In the years that followed came the memorials, wide vistas, and great buildings of nationhood: the Capitol, Washington Monument, Jefferson Memorial, National Mall, that lent Washington the gravitas and imposing beauty of a national capital. Next is Cape Town in South Africa. Cape Town lies cradled between mountain and sea on what the 16th century English explorer Sir Francis Drake called the fairest cape we saw in the whole circumference of the earth. Table Mountain, flat-topped and often mist-wreathed, provides the cape's crowning beauty. Visitors can take a cableway or hike to its various lookouts for views across the city to the ocean beyond. Next is Mesa Verde in Colorado. Amid the remote mesas of southwestern Colorado, sheltered in the steep sandstone alcoves of the canyon walls, are some 600 cliff-cut dwellings built and then mysteriously abandoned by the region's indigenous Puebloan people between 500 and 1300. Rediscovered in 1874, the Pueblos can now be visited on ranger-led guided tours. Next is Paris, France. Baron Haussmann's reordering of Paris in the 1800s, which drove boulevards through the alleys of the city, displaced the poor, and was meant to keep down rebellion, was hardly designed to create one of the world's most romantic places. Yet something magical happened. Charm and intimacy flourished amid the city's new order of bohemian cafes, tiny patisseries, wonderful restaurants, rambling flea markets, and quaint neighborhoods. In Paris, the rational and the romantic blend together in a way that feels distinctly French. Next is stark and wild. We're in the Arctic in Sweden. There are the landscapes of the Swedish Arctic: forests, frosted tundra, and sparkling lakes. There's the wildlife: wolves, bears, and reindeer. And then there is the breathtaking aurora borealis, or northern lights, one of nature's most elusive wonders. The Sami people call the aurora many names, including, let me see this, Guovsas, the light that can be heard. Next is the Devil's Marbles in Australia. In a remote area of the Northern Territory, a site sacred to the Australian Aborigines, crouch clusters of huge granite outcroppings. Scoured by wind and seared by desert heat, they are gradually eroded into precariously poised and ever rounder boulders, creating one of Australia's strangest and most iconic landscapes. Next is the Badlands National Park in South Dakota. Around 17 million years ago, sea covered most of the present-day Great Plains. Today, some of the thick sediments of that sea, lifted and eroded, have become the rugged canyons and deeply carved buttes of the 244,000-acre Badlands National Park. This otherworldly landscape would be remarkable on its own, but the region also contains the world's richest fossil from the Oligocene period, laid down some 20 to 35 million years ago, along with the largest protected area of mixed grass prairie in the United States. Next, leopard seal. Next are the ice sheets of Antarctica. Snow falls slowly across Antarctica, barely enough in a year to cover your shoes, but it collects gradually, flake on flake, year on year, until it compacts to form the ice that covers 98% of the continent. Over millennia, gravity pulls some of this immense ice sheet toward the sea, where it forms floating ice shelves or calves into icebergs. Wildlife has a chance just on this tiny fringe, and penguins, seals, whales, and seabirds contrive to live in the coldest, driest, and windiest place on Earth. Next is the Salar de Uyuni in Bolivia. Little disturbs the monochrome of the world's largest salt flat, which sits high in the Andes at nearly 12,000 feet. The beauty of the dazzling horizon, filling white, is thrown into sharp relief by mineral lakes of emerald and vermilion, the pyramidal peaks of vast volcanoes, and every November, the pink of the thousands of flamingos that come to Salar de Uyuni to breed. As remarkable as the region's beauty is its flatness, the variation in height of just 4 feet across some 4,500 square miles. Next are the Galapagos Islands in Ecuador. The Enchanted Isles, or the Islas Encantadas, as the earliest Spanish sailors called them, still cast a spell. Visitors leapfrog by a small boat from one island to the next, mesmerized by exotic creatures that, almost predator-free over evolutionary millennia, remain unfazed by their strange two-legged guests. Next is Landmannalaugar in Iceland, which I am 90% sure I said wrong, but Icelandic is just one of those languages, isn't it? A vivid volcano terrain, steaming hot springs, bubbling sulfurous pools, and a mountainous moonscape streaked with strangely colored lava draws visitors at Landmannalaugar. Hikers in particular come to tackle Bláhnjúkur, or Blue Peak, and the 4-day Laugavegur Trail, two of Iceland's most popular hikes. Next are the Chocolate Hills in Bohol Island in the Philippines. It's easy to see how the hundreds of conical hills, a rare karst landscape on Bohol, the Philippines' 10th largest island, got their name. At least if you visit in the dry season when the grass covering the hillocks withers to a chocolate brown. Next is the Sossusvlei Dunes in Namibia. At 1,250 feet, the sinuous dunes of the southern Namib Desert are some of the highest in the world. bolstered in places by binding of vegetation that is watered by seasonal rivers and the heavy fogs that roll in from the Atlantic Ocean. This sand's high iron content lends the dunes their pink-orange hues. Next is the racetrack Playa in Death Valley, California. How can boulders move by themselves across a dry, flat lake bed on the flanks of Death Valley? The phenomenon went without explanation until scientists solved the mystery at last. A rare rain must fall when temperatures drop low enough to freeze the water before it evaporates, and wind blows enough for floating panels of ice to push the stones. Next are the Emerald Lakes in Tongariro National Park in New Zealand. Ancient craters filled with water, the Emerald Lakes are part of the still active Mount Tongariro volcano and are colored by minerals leaching from the surrounding thermal areas. Hikers can view them on New Zealand's most popular day hike, the 12-mile Tongariro Alpine Crossing. Next is the Grand Prismatic Spring in Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. The Grand Prismatic Spring is a watery, earthbound rainbow, a hot spring painted by nature in its most brilliant colors. Different microbes in the spring flourish at various temperatures and assume pigmentation appropriate to their environment. Temperatures at the center of the spring are too high to support bacteria in any numbers, so the blue is the blue of ordinary water and its selective absorption of visible light. The science may be prosaic, but the result is magical. Next is the Grand Canyon National Park in Arizona. Awestruck visitors stand at Mather Point, one of the most popular viewing spots in the vast rim of the Grand Canyon. They are specks against North America's greatest natural spectacle, in places 18 miles across and 6,000 feet deep. Their allotted span is a moment against the 6 million years the Colorado River has taken to carve the canyon, an even briefer flicker against the 2 billion years of geologic time layered in the ancient shale, sandstone, and limestone of the canyon walls. Next is the Haleakala crater in Maui in Hawaii. Lower down, the slopes of Haleakala are swathed in lush rainforest and loud with birdsong. Not here, close to the volcano's 10,023-foot summit. Here, below the rim, in the vast bowl of Haleakala's crater, there's only ash, dust, lava, and the sound of the wind. A workshop of nature still cluttered with the raw beginnings of world-making, in the words of writer Jack London, who in 1907 ventured into this rocky maw and its jagged crests and spiracles of fantastic shape. Next is the Mojave Desert in the United States. Far from the madding metropolitan crowds of Las Vegas and Los Angeles that surround it, the Mojave Desert offers the balm of silence and solitude. Canyons, giant mesas, mountains, towering dunes, and vast dust-dry plains make up one of North America's most elemental landscapes. It is a world little touched by humans save for the odd crumbling mine or homestead, but one which nature adorns with the beauty of the Joshua tree and spring's brief-lived wildflowers. We've got 10 left. Let's see what they are. Spoilers. Next is the Northwest Passage in Canada. The Northwestern Passage is not one place nor one route, but a long-sought means of transit from the Atlantic to the Pacific through the labyrinth of ice-bound Arctic waterways of northbound Canada. Retreating pack ice has made the route increasingly accessible, opening up an elemental world of tundra, mountains, and icy seas. Next are the pinnacles in Western Australia. Beyond the obvious agents of wind and rain, no one can agree on quite how the limestone pinnacles in Western Australia's Nambung National Park were created, but no one disputes their eerie beauty. Many of the region's 25,000 annual visitors come at dusk or dawn when the sun casts long shadows and the soft light brings out the pinnacles as sandy reds, yellows, and ochres to dazzling effect. Next are the lava fields in Oregon. Oregon is one of North America's volcanic hotspots, dotted with volcanoes that have erupted and will almost certainly erupt again. Much of the region is scattered with a spectacular geologic legacy of past eruptions, not least the great lava fields, buttes, and petrified forests near a bend in the Cascade Range. Next is the Simien Mountains National Park in Ethiopia. Look at this beautiful picture. It has been called Africa's Grand Canyon, a high and undulating plateau in Ethiopia's Simien Mountains that over millions of years has been massively eroded to form vast gorges, dizzying precipices, jagged peaks, and gigantic canyons that are 5,000 feet deep in places. Next is Lake Baikal in Siberia in Russia. The sublimely beautiful Lake Baikal in southeast Siberia is a place of superlatives. It is the world's oldest, 25 million years, and deepest at 5,387 feet lake. It is also one of the largest and contains an estimated 20% of the world's free-flowing fresh water. It has more than 1,000 plant and at least 2,500 animal species, 80% of them endemic. Next is Socotra in Yemen. Socotra, some 220 miles from the Yemen mainland, is among the world's most important centers of biodiversity, combining elements of Africa, Asia, and Europe in one tiny 4-island archipelago. Its plants and animals have adapted to a range of landscapes from the hot, dry lowlands to the mist-shrouded granite peaks of the Hajir Mountains at the island's heart. Next is the Sahara in Africa. Only the Arctic and Antarctic rival the Sahara among Earth's emptiest places, covering 3.6 million square miles, just smaller than the United States. It appears in the popular imagination as a sea of sand, a landscape of endless wind-blown dunes stretching to sun-hazed horizons. In truth, much of the Sahara consists of hamada, huge, barren, rocky plateaus, as well as salt flats and vast, dry valleys. Every few years it has snow on its highest point, Emikusi. Look at all the camels, little caravan. Let's see where we're going next. The minimal forest at Pamukkale in Turkey. Snow white, Arctic blue, the colors of Turkey's strangest landscape appear to belong in another climate. The white is not snow, but calcium carbonate, deposited when mineral-laden water from a series of hot springs cools, as it cascades through natural pools and overflows petrified terraces of travertine. The ancient Greeks and Romans swore by the pools as therapeutic properties and built temples, baths, and theaters on the site, the ruins of which add to the magic of the place that Turks call the Cotton Castle. Two more places. We've got K2 in the Karakoram Range of China and Pakistan. K2, said climber Fosco Morini, is all rock, ice, storm, and abyss, all atoms and stars, with the nakedness of the world before the first human, or of the cindered planet after the last. No matter its humble name, coined by 19th century British surveyors, and no matter that the 28,251 feet, it is the world's second highest peak, 778 feet lower than Everest. With its classic pyramidal profile and the grandeur of its immense rock walls, it yields to no mountain in its majesty. And finally, we are at the prairies in the Midwestern United States. The prairies of the Midwest are one of the great mythic landscapes of America, a place whose wide skies seem to speak directly to the pioneering soul. "This was my country," said writer and painter Georgia O'Keeffe. "Terrible winds and a wonderful emptiness. Today it remains an epic landscape that has the capacity to inspire, where change," said John Steinbeck, "comes over us like the stealthy perfume of wildflowers hidden in the grass." And that is the end of our book. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you found this video relaxing and educational, and I hope that you have a very good